Freud was great at laying out what all the problems are in civilization where babies are frustrated and not provided the nest. This is all the things that can go wrong. He thought it was the way normal babies develop. They don't look like that in nested communities. So positive touch, no negative touch. So spanking, no slapping, no absence of mother or caregiver, always present. All those things are important. And then self-directed play. And this is free play, not structured, not organized by adults. We all need to play throughout life because that's where creativity is, that's where love is, that's where, enjoyment of life is.
Our today's guest is Darcia Narvaez, a professor of psychology from University of Notre Dame and author of several books. In her career, she has received several awards related to her book and research, such as the William James Book Award and inaugural Expanded Reason Award. Today, we'll be interviewing her about her latest book titled The Evolved Nest: How We Have Been Separated More and More from Nature's Way of Raising Children and the Consequence of Doing So. I hope you enjoy the talk. So, Darcia, usually I just start with an introduction. Can you maybe shortly introduce who you are and what you're working on?
All right. My name is Darcia Narvaez, and I'm a professor emerita of psychology at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, USA. My work these days is to focus on human flourishing, human thriving for the lifespan, which begins in early life. And you have to follow our species' evolved nest in order to foster a very healthy brain and body and well-being for life. And unfortunately, in many nations, industrialized nations, babies' well-being is not a primary concern. And there are a lot of myths about that. And so we are developing children and adults who are very dysregulated in all sorts of ways. And so it leads to illness of all kinds and the kind of societal decay that we see. So that's part of what I do. And the other part is I use then as a baseline our 99% of our existence on the planet as a species. And that's in hunter-gatherer civilization, foragers primarily, which are still around the world in indigenous cultures. And they have a way of being and knowing how to nest the young and nest themselves throughout life and feel connected to the universe and honoring future generations and ancestors, and then also earth systems and just being a partner to the rest of the earth community. So I integrate all that.
Right. It's very interesting because usually when I meet a scientist, they're sort of having this different view that the modern way of doing things with all of the knowledge that we already gather in sciences is the best way of doing anything, including like raising children maybe, and like facing all of their issues. But you're saying that we have evolved for so long just optimizing over this thing to develop child's personality and like their problem solving and so on. And what we're doing currently in modern world is actually kind of diverging from that, and like there are consequences of doing that.
Yeah, so if you think about brains and how they function, Ian McGilchrist has done a lot of detailed investigation and review of left brain and right brain functioning. And so if you numb one side of the brain or the other, they are different ways of looking at the world. What we've done when we undercare for young babies, is we're underdeveloping the right hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is the one that's aware of dynamism and fluidity and living beings and can deal with uncertainty and governs our ability to have empathy and feel like we're, shape-shift into another way of seeing things. We undermine those capacities by leaving babies to cry, leaving them to sleep alone. And what happens is these very innate primate systems get enhanced, which are fear and panic and anger. And those systems then try to keep the baby alive. And then they become part of the personality of that child. the right hemisphere doesn't grow properly then because it's supposed to in the early years. And then they go to school and they're told to think and take tests and read and, all left brain stuff. And so
Mm,
then you get stuck with people who are easily triggered into those survival systems, and then they can intellectualize about it and justify those systems. And then they're missing that fluidity, that communalism that is our heritage. We are a big brain species for social connection, and we've undermined that, and now we don't feel it with the rest of nature, with the animals and plants. And so we're destroying the whole planet as a result of the undermining of early development, and then, never healing. Well, I mean, there are people who are doing that now, but on average, people aren't healing. They just get mad, want their way, and that's the tantruming survival system. And then you use your abstract capacities to force it on the world, and that's what colonization's about.
right. I see. But just to be clear, you're not like all against education, right? Just maybe you think it's too early to force children to get education.
Well, it depends on what kind of education we mean. So, in the indigenous perspective, to be educated means to know something is self-transformation. It's just not information. Information is like, well, semantic knowledge. What's that get you? It doesn't help you live well on earth, right? So it's also the wrong kind of education. And then reading, if you force that on young children, encourage them to read too early, that's when the right brain is supposed to be gathering experiences from life, from play, from trying this, trying that. And what you're doing is you're misdirecting development again. And throughout life, the left brain is the one who generalizes and draws conclusions, but it bases its generalizations on what the right hemisphere gives it as information, content from experiences. But if the children haven't had any experiences, if they've only been sitting in front of a screen or in a carrier or in a crib or playpen, they don't have the experiences that the right hemisphere needs. So then the left hemisphere needs. And so the left hemisphere looks for something else, looks for some script or ideology, some framework to guide its life. So then you don't have a flexible human being, you've got one that goes according to some script. And so you have religion, the love of guns, or whatever it is, something that makes you feel safe and is really hard to heal and get back to being fully human.
And before we get into like all of the details of your work, maybe I want to know about you better. So you're basically studying human development, and I'm curious how you get into studying it. Is there any like interesting story in your life that makes you like really interested in this?
Well, I spent half my childhood living outside of the United States in Spanish-speaking countries, and some of them third world countries, where children my age I would see them on street corners and they would be selling gum or chiclet. They would be in rags, and I could not understand how could this be? And I'd go back to the United States. We would go away for a year and then go to the States for 2 years and then go away for a year. And it was just jarring, always jarring, the injustice of the world and the children who are suffering. And I would cry over those children. And I just couldn't. Anyway, it took me a few careers to get back to trying to figure out what's the source of that injustice. And so that's why the evolved nest, for me, is the answer. And the lack of indigenous wisdom from lack of nestedness, from babyhood on, leads us to just be very absent-minded, mindless creatures on Earth right now.
Right. So evolvedness is like a word here that has been thrown a lot. Can you maybe like describe it more? Like what in your perception is an evolvedness, and why is it so important?
Yes, so this is what we share with many other animals. They have nests, and that's something that is inherited beyond genes. We inherit many things other than genes. Cell structures and body plans are not genetically transmitted. The evolved nest is one of those things that's not genetically transmitted, but it's just built into kind of our instincts for how to care for the young, unless we interfere with it as modern technology and medicine do. They interfere with all the hormonal aspects of birth, for example. So the 9 components that we have studied in my laboratory and that are mostly identified, well, they're found all over the world in hunter-gatherer societies or communities. Soothing, perinatal experience. That means soothing during gestation when the mother's pregnant. She feels welcome, the baby is welcome, the fetus is welcome, and she's not too stressed out. Birth is soothing. There's no separation of baby from mother and no forced timing of birth. The baby gets to decide. Babies vary by about 55 days how long they stay in the womb. And then after birth, there's just a lot of laying in. The mother and child are waited on and supported as they build their relationship and breastfeed successfully. That's the second one, is breastfeeding. Every animal's milk is unique. Ours is thin, needs to be ingested frequently. It changes based on the time of day. If it's in the morning, there's energizing ingredients. At night, sleep-inducing ingredients. If there's an infectious agent, the mother's body will produce an antibody for it based on the infant's saliva, signaling that to the mother. So it's really magical. It builds intelligence and all sorts of health outcomes we know. So that for our species is on average you breastfeed for at least 2 years, if not 4 years, because that's how long it takes for the baby's immune system to develop near adult levels. I should say babies need all this because we resemble fetuses of other animals for the first 2 years of life. And so we need an external womb experience where our needs are met immediately. Because the brain is growing so quickly, we're only born with maybe 25% of the adult volume size. And so everything that baby is experiencing is adding to the health of the child or shutting it down if they're in too much distress. So it's really important to offer that soothing experiences, breastfeeding, a welcoming social climate where the baby and the mother feel like they're wanted, they matter, they belong. And then positive touch is another one. So that's number 4. And that's related to all sorts of physiological things being built well. And the social connection, really important. The baby needs to always feel connected, never isolated, never insecure, because that then messes up development and leads to all sorts of problems. Freud was great at laying out what all the problems are in civilization where babies are frustrated and not provided the nest. This is all the things that go wrong. He thought it was the way normal babies develop. They don't look like that in nested communities. So positive touch, no negative touch. So spanking, no slapping, no absence of mother or caregiver, always present. All those things are important. And then self-directed play, and this is free play, not structured, not organized by adults. It's the children playing with multiple aged playmates, freely, creatively, running around outside, hopefully. And then there's responsive relationships. So that means when the child is young as a baby, you want to keep the baby in optimal aroused condition as that brain is growing so fast. So then you keep them, happy, comforted, and so on. And as we grow older, we need mentors, we need responsive relationships. So all the components of the nest are for all of us, except for the first 2, soothing birth and breastfeeding. But we all need to be welcomed. We all need touch. We all need affection. We all need play. We all need responsive relationships. And then with another number 7 is other nurturers. So it's not just mom here. This is not a mom-only thing or a mom and dad-only thing. It's the community that provides the nest. So we call them allo mothers or allo parents, those other nurturers in a child's life or even our lives. We need mentors throughout life. And then 2 more. One is nature, immersion, and connection, so that we feel like we're part of Earth community. We know these animals. We care for these animals, these plants, these waterways, these lands. And the last one is routine healing practices. And that's because we as animals who can make choices and make bad choices or get out of line and imbalanced, we need to get back in balance so that we can be channels of love to others and flexibility, and not be in that bracing mode of the survival systems when they get worried about the future or are scared about something. So those are the 9. Soothing perinatal experience, breastfeeding, affectionate touch, welcoming climate, self-directed play, responsive relationships, allo parents or other nurturers, nature, immersion, and connection, and routine healing practices.
That's very interesting. There are a lot of things to uncover there. Maybe we'll go one by one. So the first one that I'm interested in is you mentioned about breastfeeding and how it's like a very complicated system. Like within day and night, the milk content can be different and so on. Like that's incredible, and I didn't know about that. Um, and I feel like as a modern human, we often are very arrogant about our ability to capture whatever is evolved by nature. We thought, let's make a formula that is perfect for our kids, but turns out maybe it's not that perfect and we're missing something. Yeah, I think that's a very good point, an important point to say.
Yeah, and that arrogance is the left brain. Ian McGilchrist talked about how in the Western world it's been taken over by left brain functioning, and that's, you know, dominated the last hundreds of years, and then it's been globalized, right? So the left hemisphere doesn't know things. It knows, it's only wired to itself and has its little ideas and models. The right hemisphere knows life, but if you underdevelop it and you don't develop the connection between the brains, you can act out as a kind of a automaton almost in this left brain, abstracting, modeling, ivory tower thinking. And so that's what we do.
Right. And another thing that you mentioned is a self-directed play. I feel like this is something that, yeah, we really undermine in a modern culture. I don't know about other culture, but especially for Asian culture, for example, like there is a huge emphasis on getting like straight A grades. Otherwise, you will not feel loved by your families, and otherwise you'll feel like left out by your friends that have all straight A's and so on. So yeah, I think like it's like we have really diverged from that kind of self-directed play. We don't have time anymore because we have to study so much, because there is so much pressure on passing tests, getting to good universities. Like even the American dreams is like all about that, right? Getting into good university, getting good grades, getting good work. Why do you think self-directed play is so important, and like how do we like try to balance this in modern work?
Well, it's important because it helps shape the brain. Again, when you play, you have to play responsibly or react in a favorable way to your partner. Because if you're too aggressive, and you can see this when animals play together, puppies or kittens, that if one of them gets too aggressive, the other player will go, and so you have to back off from your aggression, or else the other player will not play with you anymore. And you learn those kinds of things. You learn how to be, responsive. You learn how to be a leader. You learn how to use your executive functions, your ability to, anticipate what your playmate might do, and then what to do when they do something you didn't expect. I mean, goodness, you have a lot of decision making, and it's whole-bodied. All sorts of genes are turned on by play. It's building your ability to be flexible and creative throughout life when you have that immersion, especially in early life. But we all need to play throughout life, because that's where creativity is, that's where love is, that's where, enjoyment of life is.
Right. And I don't know if this is correct, maybe you can confirm it, but I also feel like during play, you're exploring how the world around you works. You're exploring how physics work intuitively. Like when you splash water by this much, how much water splash out of it? Is that correct? Like, do we actually need play just to learn about our surrounding environment?
Yes, I think so. I think that's a good point. We have, our subconscious, our non-conscious mind is very complex. There's many systems in there, but part of that is our what some people call our animal mind. And our animal mind knows how to live well, knows how to, walk carefully in a dangerous land. It knows all this stuff very intuitively, knows how to stay alive, but we undermine it when we don't let children play and build that mind, that awareness of how to move your body on this kind of landscape or on this limb of a tree, or how to climb. You're building all sorts of intuitions and know-how for living well as a member of the Earth community.
So you mentioned about how play is like very important. And in those 9 aspects of evolvedness, you also mentioned about the importance of community. I think this is very interesting and contrastive to the modern world because at least where I live, most of the houses are filled with 2 parents and like few kids, and then that's it. But maybe as the old saying goes, like it takes a village to raise a kid, but we no longer have the village anymore. Family lives like very far away because I guess transportation allows them to, and like housing works that way today. So like what are the effects of all of those things that we have in modern world, and like why do we think we should try to, like what is so important about having a whole community and not just parents to develop the kids?
Well, if we just think about babies, they need 24/7 presence of caregivers. And that's too intense for one person or 2 people, right? They need support systems, and they need mentors, people who are wise elders who know how to soothe a baby, know how to respond to a child that the new parents typically don't know. And they need the help. And people who are between ages 20 and 40 tend to focus on their careers. They focus on who they are in the community. And in our ancestral context, hunter-gatherer communities, it's the elders who usually take care of the babies. Half the time it's one of them or others holding the child, not the mother, almost from the beginning. And they are the ones who are there to play with the child. They're the ones who are responsive, who are doing the welcoming, who are, showing others how to be welcoming. And, they have all sorts of wisdom that the community needs to learn, the younger ones. So the community is critical, especially today when we have 2 parents working in industrial nations. We've made it really hard to be a human being because the system wants us to work. And capital and money are the highest values, not well-being of people or animals or planet. And so we need to change that. We have to realize that money is not edible. Money doesn't, make a good life. It enables you to get things you need today, but we have to restructure our communities so that you don't have to have so much money, that you can live in multiple family dwellings, that your work can be raising the garden instead of, having to go to the office. So there are many ways to make modifications. The localization movement is one of those where you make sure that the funds stay within the local community and you support everyone's well-being there in various ways, rather than sending it out overseas to some, food source that you import, for example.
I see. That's interesting point that like a lot of parents today, like not only the problem is only 2 parents raising the children, even the parents sometimes are busy with their own work. And what's your opinion about like surrogate care, I guess? For example, like if a parent is too busy doing their work and they're hiring a babysitter or just like leaving their kids in a daycare, are there like consequences of that in the child development?
Yes. Well, if you are wealthy enough to have a nanny that you hire to care for your child in a nurturing way, a loving way, not a harsh way, that nanny should stay with the children till they're maybe 12 years old, because they're going to be bonded to that person. Sending a baby to a daycare setting is a terrible thing for the baby. The baby will not feel known, will not get the attention they need. They'll be strapped down often, and they'll probably have formula instead of breast milk, breastfeeding. And it's just a very bad situation. In our ancestral context, it would be more like 3 adults to 1 baby, or even 15 adults. A recent study said 15 adults to 1 child, caring for 1 child. That's quite different. It's the opposite in daycare centers.
15 adults carrying 1 child. Yeah, that's very opposite to school setting as well. It's like one teacher caring for 40 children. Both of them are unnatural,
Yeah.
but maybe in like different ways.
Yeah.
You also mentioned about touch and how that's really important to the child development. Can you maybe elaborate on why it's so important? Like, because in today's world we have like more online community than physical community. I guess like I like to rationalize it's kind of a good thing that we have an online community because it's making easier for like-minded people to get along. But you're saying that it's not so good as I think because touch is a really important aspect of a relationship. Is that correct?
Yes, especially in early life when you're building how the body's systems are going to work. So even at birth, the oxytocin system, which is the so-called cuddle hormone, it's integrated into all sorts of capacities, but it's designed to just go in the flow with connecting to mother and to others. And if you disrupt that by giving artificial oxytocin to the mother to speed up labor so the baby's born faster, you are now messing up her hormones, the baby's hormones, their bonding. And so it's important to not do that. And then you want to have baby and mom together because right after birth, the baby's ready to crawl up the mom's belly and start the milk flow in the breast by manipulating the nipple. And that is, again, empowering, right? Think about how empowering that is as a baby. And to have the baby be in charge of who they are, really important. And that the touch that the newborn and the mother are having are then fostering hormones that are actually going to calm them down. They had to mobilize their hormones for the birth experience, but then they have to calm them down. If you separate the baby away, the baby doesn't have a chance to calm down. They need mother to calm themselves down. Mother, too, needs the baby to calm herself down. So they're both highly stressed for weeks afterwards. It's crazy. So that's just one example. Another aspect of what happens with touch in early life, appropriate touch, is the vagus nerve gets established properly. The vagus nerve is a nerve that runs to all the major systems of the body. And if it's out of line or underdeveloped, you can have health problems in any of those systems. Brain seizures, heart problems, breathing problems, digestive problems. And so you want to make sure that's set properly. Well, you do that by carrying baby around all the time and keeping them calm, sleeping with baby, bed sharing safely. So all those things are critical, and we don't know exactly, each baby's different, what's growing at any particular moment. And so you want to have the nest right there to ensure that they're getting what they need at whichever aspect of their systems is being developed at that moment.
Right. And on a semi-related note, I vaguely remember reading in your book about how responsive a parent is, or like a carer is in a community to the baby, will have impact on their attachment. For example, if the carer isn't very responsive, then they might have some anxiety issue with the attachment, or maybe they will just neglect asking or not even asking the carer at all. Do you think that is like an issue that people should be aware of when they decided to not be there 24/7 with their child?
Yeah, so attachment is one way that's relatively easy to measure neurobiological outcomes. So it's just a measure of how well enough, if things are going well enough. It's not measuring how optimally they're going, but when a child is not getting enough responsiveness, they're going to develop an insecure attachment, which means they've learned that their caregiver is not very reliable, and they're going to be dysregulated easily in relationships forever unless they get some healing. But they'll be, misunderstand relationships. They won't know how to start a friendship or maintain it or recognize a trustworthy relationship, because that's what was supposed to develop in the early years with secure attachment. And so if you are leaving a baby to cry or leaving them to sleep alone, you are now undermining all sorts of neurobiological systems, including potentially what we can recognize as attachment.
So you mentioned about how attachment can be affected very early on by the responsiveness of their care. I think that is something that a lot of people usually do not understand, and they just blame, oh, that's just how the kids are genetically wired.
Yep, you're
Um,
right.
and I feel like that belief is a lot of the times are very destructive because they did not take account of the importance of how people are raising their children to be a proper adult, I guess, and like having the ability to start friendship, relationship, and be a useful member of a community and so on. I think that's like something that's like a belief that a lot of people have that is really destructive.
I agree. Yeah, they don't understand child development. They don't understand that parents are actually shaping personality. They're shaping well-being. They're shaping their trajectory for health, for the life of that child, the health in social relations, the health physically, the health mentally, all from those early, especially 3 years. And more so for boys. Boys are less resilient than girls. They have less built-in resilience. They're more susceptible to trauma, especially social trauma, and they mature more slowly. So they're about 2 years behind girls. And so parents need to be even more nurturing for boys, but they tend to be less nurturing in the modern society.
That's very contradictory to what I always learn. Like boys cannot cry and so on. But yeah, I'm curious, like why do boys mature less quickly and why do they need more caring?
Well, that's just the way they are. They're the more fragile sex. The baseline sex is female, and then you have to have the hormones to make a male fetus. But it's just that girls have two X chromosomes, so if one of them's damaged, the other one can make up for it. But boys only have one X and one Y, and so they don't have a backup system. They develop more slowly.
Right.
I don't know. That's just the way it is.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's a world great mystery. So another like semi-related question to what you're saying is what about people that are unfortunate enough to have to live in orphanage? Do they have a lot of issues with if they have, let's say, like a good surrogate care, like a good, I don't know, like orphanage care, like will they have a lot of attachment issue, given maybe the surrogate care isn't breastfeeding them directly or something?
Yeah, so children, there have been a lot of accidental experiments with orphanages and hospitalizations. And the children or the babies that are only fed bottles and their diapers changed tend to die, whereas the children who have more recognition of them as people will at least live. And the ones that do the best, if they've been adopted after 6 months, I'm trying to remember if that's the number, I'm not sure what age, but the ones who do best after adoption are the ones who had a caregiver who would carry them around, who gave them special attention. And so they felt like they were welcomed, that they mattered, they belonged, they were responded to, right? So that was at least some form of attachment as an indicator of neurobiological development. But I know they've done some studies of the Romanian orphans as adults, those who lived, and they're still very troubled and never finding their grounding, their center, their relational kind of connectedness.
I used to have a idea that like it's better to adopt people in orphanage than to have your own kids. I know it's like a bit weird, a bit of a weird idea to have. But my intuition was because genetically you have to like gamble when you have a kid, but in orphanage you can just like pick one kid that you think is genetically the best, I guess the best. But you're saying that because genetic isn't everything in determining a child's outcome, it's actually like a lot of the orphanage actually lives to be a troublesome adults with a lot of attachment issues and so on.
Yeah, the real
It's,
story is
yeah.
the real story is epigenetics. It's not you might be born with a particular set of genes, but they don't get turned on. They have to be turned on or off. They're just a blueprint, and they are turned on or off by experience. And so it's the experience that really matters because we're all very similar. We share almost 99% of our genes with bonobos and chimpanzees. So
That's right.
I
Yeah.
know. But we
And you think the majority of the difference there is the epigenetics?
no, I probably shouldn't have brought that one up. But you and I share 99.999% of our genes, right? And so there's very little that's different between us. And in our ancestral context, people's personalities are very similar. They're very happy and joyous and gleeful and responsive and forgiving and loving and listening and all the good things that we think, oh, no, that's romantic. It can't be possible. Yes, it's possible because when you're nested, you're getting all your needs met. And why wouldn't you then just be joyously centered and connected to others? It's always happening. And then when some stressful thing happens, you're resilient. You're able to deal with it because you are confident. You feel like you're part of Earth, that you are secure on Earth. And we, undermine all that. And then we blame the child.
Yeah, right. So the thing that you inherit from your parents is not only like the genetics, but also the epigenetics, which part of the gene is turned on and off. If your mother is like often stressed out and like not very happy, then the child is not very happy as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, if she's stressed during pregnancy, yes, you're more likely to have an easily stressed brain. Your HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal gland axis, is going to
Very
be
low.
stress reactive, and so that can happen. You can also inherit your parents' anxiety. So if their parents were stressed and they developed kind of a epigenetic anxiety, you can inherit an epigenetic anxiety from them, besides having your own epigenetics shaped by your parenting.
So we have mentioned a lot about how the modern ways of raising children have a lot of issues because we're trying to diverge from the evolvedness that have been optimized in the nature for millions of years. But are there any things that we modern human do correctly, or is it all wrong? Like, do we improve anything in the modern world?
Yeah, I always beat my head over that question. Like, what have we done well? Let's see. It depends on what baseline you're comparing it to. A lot of times when people say, oh, things are much better, they're looking at 1850 or they're looking at, 1600. Well, yeah, things are better than then. Or they're looking at, 2000. I'm sorry, well, 200. And yeah, things are better for women than then, right? Or when slavery was rampant. But if you look back at our ancestral context, hunter-gatherer communities, things are better then. Okay, here's one that is better today. Emergency medicine. So if you break your arm or you slice it open, emergency medicine is there to make sure you don't die from that. Or vaccines even. So emergency medicine is the biggest advantage maybe. All right, I'll put my hat on that.
Yeah, that's fair. Like hundreds of years ago, if your child has diarrhea, you're probably like panicking, right? Oh no, is he going to survive or not? But in today's world, like just go to the hospital or drink some, I don't know, sugar and salt solution or something. And we don't have to worry so much about like that kind of illness when the child is very vulnerable. And I think that's a good point. Is that it, or there's nothing else that we do correctly?
Oh, well, we get used to being able to read books. I mean, that's wonderful. I love that. Or play an instrument, a variety of instruments, or going to films. These are all fun things, right? They're kind of amusements. As Neil Postman said long ago, we're amusing ourselves to death. It's fun, but where are we going to end up?
Right. So you're not saying like it's all bad. Maybe there are just like a lot of room for improvements in how we're currently raising children.
Yes.
Let's see. What am I missing any aspect of evolvedness? Is there anything?
Well, we didn't talk about nature immersion or healing.
Right. Can you maybe elaborate on what do you mean by nature emergence and healing?
So the nature immersion, we co-evolved with the natural world to, you know, build what I call a receptive intelligence, to be able to recognize the signals of the birds, of the animals around us, or what the winds indicate, you know, and all that kind of wisdom. That's part of our animal mind that we underdevelop in the modern world. So nature connection not only builds our intelligences, it also helps us, build the relationships with all those local animals and plants so that we know how to care for them, how to live responsibly and respectfully with them instead of dominating and exterminating and eradicating them because we don't know how to live well with them. I think of a story, I think it was David Abram was visiting a temple somewhere in the world, and every day they would put a bowl of rice on the altar for the gods, and every morning the rice bowl would be empty. And he said, wow, what's going on there? That doesn't make scientific sense. So he stayed up to watch what happened to that rice. And what happened was a whole army of ants would come in, and they would carry each grain of rice down the side of the bowl and carry it across to their nest, right? Until the bowl was empty. So there's a way of getting along with animals and plants that's a cooperative way. I mean, they are sentient agents too. Why shouldn't they be allowed to live as long as they want to? Who are we? That arrogance again, that left brain. So we can learn from indigenous peoples around the world how to live respectfully with the predators and those scary things that are all around that we tend to just kill.
Yeah, I guess human is like very adaptive creature. Once we no longer have the needs to live with those animals, we actually lose the ability to do so.
Yeah.
And I feel like in today's world, it's kind of replaced by the understanding of like intuitive understanding of how electronics work. I guess maybe instead of like bird chirping, you have like tweet notification, and then you have instinct to just open up your tablet or laptop or whatever, and you have like a better understanding of how application and websites works instead of how how tree grows and how to sap a tree, whatever. And I don't think it's like necessarily a bad thing given like our current situations. But yeah, I guess it's like unfortunate that we have to lose that kind of ability to live along with animals because we have been like hurting like a lot of animals' nests as well, right? Like we take elephants' tusk, and then now like instead of just taking the tusk, sometimes we kill them as well, and now the children of the elephant are left without mothers and so on. And same with like orangutans and tigers and all of the antique species. So yeah, I think it's very unfortunate.
Yeah,
You're right.
and we can hopefully learn to use our technology in a way and build our cities or our ways of being without destroying so much.
Right. Okay. I think it's been an interesting podcast with you. I believe you have a lot of books beside Evolve Nest, right? And maybe in the future we can talk more about like all of those books. I think I would be very interested in talking about them. It's just that some of them are very long, and it will take some time for me to read them and actually understand what's going on.
So maybe the kinship worldview be a good one.
A kinship worldview.
Oops.
So what is that one about?
This is the indigenous worldview and how to get back to it. And it's a dialogue.
I will read
Yeah, it's
that,
easy to read. It's a dialogue book. My co-author and I took 28 quotes from mostly Native American people, and then we talk about them. And it's kind of fun.
All right, that's a recommendation for next one. All right, so yeah, it's been very pleasurable talking to you. Thank you for your patience with this semi-professional podcast. And yeah, I would hope to see you again in the next
Well, I
time.
hope so. Thank you, Alvin.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See ya.